Stay tuned for a conversation with Bill Moyers and filmmaker Errol Morris.
First things, simple things first. What's happened to Adams?
Well, last month he was released from prison and returned to his family in Columbus, Ohio. This is after close to 13 years of imprisonment for a crime which I'm convinced he didn't commit.
Released, was he also exonerated?
What happened was that his 1977 trial was reversed by the courts. The Dallas District Attorney's Office then had the option to retry him for the murder of this Dallas police officer, and they declined to do so. So he never will be exonerated in the sense of being retried for this crime and found not guilty. His legal status now is, it's as if this has never happened.
Had you decided to make the movie before you came to believe that he was innocent, or did you decide to make the movie after you decided he was innocent?
Well, I never really decided to make this movie as such. I came to Texas to make a completely different movie, a movie about a Dallas psychiatrist, Dr. James Grigson.
Dr. Death?
Dr. Death. It was during an interview with Dr. Death that I decided to go down to the Texas prisons and interview some of the inmates who had been put on death row as a result of this doctor's testimony. I interviewed about 30 inmates, Randall Adams being one of them. He wasn't the only person who told me he didn't do it. He was one among many. I didn't believe him. I didn't disbelieve him. I had no reason to think one way or the other about what he was telling me when I first met him. But there was a certain point that I reached where I realized this was the story.
What was that point? When did you become convinced that Adams was innocent and Harris was guilty?
My first meeting with David Harris in a lonely bar in the swamp between Vidor and Beaumont, Texas. And in that meeting, he told me a number of strange things. He told me that he would never forget the look in that cop's eyes as he walked up to the car. Well, I just finished reading the trial transcript to the Adams case. At trial, David Harris had said he had been slumped way down in the passenger seat of this blue compact. If he slumped way down in the passenger seat, how is it that he looked directly into the cop's eyes unless he was the one seated in the driver's seat, holding the gun, the one who pulled the trigger?
It'd be hard to do with somebody sitting between you and the other door, a driver.
What's always been amazing to me about this whole case is that anyone ever blamed Randall Adams for the crime.
Why didn't Adams's brother testify on his behalf? A curious vacancy there.
In fact, his brother did testify.
Oh.
But his brother was an alcoholic. His brother had a chronic drinking problem. His brother was arrested at the same time as Randall Adams. Right. Go back to 1976. The police officer was killed on Thanksgiving weekend. They weren't arrested, both he and his brother weren't arrested until December 21st, 3.5 weeks later. When they were arrested, they were asked to recall a Saturday evening nearly a month earlier in which, if they're telling the truth, nothing happened. Ask yourself to recall what you were doing on a Saturday night 4 weeks ago. His brother didn't offer an alibi because he was either passed out on the bed when Randall Adams came home or couldn't remember what time Adams came in that door. His brother did testify but did not offer an ironclad alibi, no.
What about David Harris? Where is he now?
David Harris is on death row. He has appealed his conviction, and following that appeal, an execution date, if the appeal fails, an execution date will be set. He may well be executed at some time in the future.
Do you think he should die for his crimes?
No, I don't. I don't believe in the death penalty. I never have, and certainly as a result of my involvement in this case, I'm more opposed to it than ever. But there's a deeper issue exposed by the story of Randall Adams, and that's that the death penalty makes mistakes more likely to happen.
Why?
Because when people become concerned with meting out vengeance, they become less interested in adjudicating facts, listening to evidence. In my opinion, a kind of bloodlust took over in 1977 at Adams's trial. Here's the killer, he's the one who did it, now let's all pull together, get a conviction, and kill the guy.
Was there evidence, were there facts that you didn't use in the film that still support the contention that Adams was innocent?
Yes, lots of them. Because I was involved in a tightrope act. I was trying to make a film which answered to my interests. A film about the things that I'm concerned about, and at the same time make a film that would benefit Randall Adams by setting out some of the details of his case.
What's the difference between what interested you and the facts that would help him? What were your prime interests?
I wanted to make a movie about, and I think at its core that's what The Thin Blue Line is, a movie about self-deception, about how we can convince ourselves that something is true even though it isn't, about how our need to believe what we want to believe is a lot stronger than our need to seek the truth.
In this case, you're talking about the authorities, the prosecuting attorney, the police, the justice system of a city.
The eyewitnesses, the surprise eyewitnesses who testified against Randall Adams.
That's scary. Did you set out intentionally to make a documentary? Or in the Hollywood sense, a movie?
I set out to make a movie. For a handheld camera and available light, I've substituted a camera on a tripod with very carefully, theatrically lit settings. All the interviews were done at one time, and all the reenactments were shot actually years later in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx.
Not in Dallas?
Not in Dallas. It's a movie that's very much constructed, put together out of blocks.
You said you used the dramatic technique. You used Hollywood lighting or film lighting. Tell me a little bit about that technique of interviewing. I'm curious as a journalist.
Well, this film has been described as the first non-fiction film noir. And it shares in common with film noir, the crime films of the 40s and 50s. It shares many of those themes, those concerns. You may remember many Hitchcock films about the wrong man, the innocent man who stumbles into some kind of net and can't get free. This is also that kind of story. It's a story about a man like you and me who one day met a guy, a killer, and his life was forever changed, and there was nothing that he could do about it. It's a very dark and very desperate story. And what I tried to do in making the film, in making The Thin Blue Line, was to convey some of that through my use of the reenactments, through my use of the score by Philip Glass.
See, those are two issues right there that concern the traditional documentarian. I come out of the traditional documentary style, and the traditionalists say, but you know, music is designed to create a mood, not to underscore a fact, and we can't use that.
Yes.
And reenactments are never permitted because it's someone's idea of what happened, not actually what happened.
Yes.
Are you concerned that by breaking the rules for a film that people think of as a documentary, you're pushing us, you're diminishing that line between journalism and imagination?
What I hoped in The Thin Blue Line was to call attention to that line, the line between truth and untruth, between style and the world out there. It's interesting, the reenactments in The Thin Blue Line are unlike the reenactments that I usually see.
On the television infotainment shows?
The reenactments in The Thin Blue Line don't purport to tell you what's true. They in fact illustrate lies. They illustrate fantasies. It's one of the sort of perverse aspects of this movie. You asked me what I believe happened on that roadway. I believe David Harris was alone in that car and shot Robert Wood, but I never show it. I show everything but that.
And the reason being?
Because what I want to do in those reenactments is to take people deeper and deeper into the ambiguities of the case, not to show what really happened.
So you had to dramatize the lies that they were telling to get at the reasons they were telling them.
Yes.
And how they could be believed even though they were lies.
Yes.
That would have been hard for journalism to do, quite frankly.
Well, The Thin Line has been called Rashomon-like. I take exception to that. If what they mean is that everything is subjective, just thinking something makes it so, I don't believe that for a second. For me, there's a fact of the matter, a fact of what happened on the roadway that night. Someone sat in the driver's seat of that blue compact car. Someone pulled the gun from out underneath the seat. Someone pulled the trigger. Someone shot Robert Wood. And it was either Randall Adams or David Harris. That's the fundamental issue at the center of all of this. Is it knowable? Yes, it is. We have access to the world out there. We're not just prisoners of our fantasies and our dreams. I wanted to make a movie about how truth is difficult to know, not how it's impossible to know. And I hope I've succeeded in that end.
Thank you very much, Errol. This has been an interview with Errol Morris for American Playhouse. I'm Bill Moyers.